backing up, I always like to start us with a little bit of a reflection before we get into the work of the next personality style. And what I wanted to talk about today in terms of determining our personality style is the idea that it's motivation that matters when you're looking at the different descriptions to try to determine which personality style you think is yours, that you have as an essence from the time you were born, and how you express it. And so in other words, you have to ask yourself the question as you listen to each one, because we're all doing the same thing, right? All personalities in some ways are approaching the world. We're all having to go through the same kind of circumstances. But when you're finding your number, you need to ask yourself, why do I do the things I'm doing? Not just, oh, yes, those are the things I'm doing, but consider why it is that you're doing those things. And that your number is not determined by what you do so much as why you do it. In other words, don't rely so much on the traits to identify your type, but instead read carefully and listen and try to understand the underlying motivations that drive the traits or behavior in each number to help yourself be able to determine which is the true expression of yourself. So as we look at that, so some of the motivations for 5 are very powerful, as they all are. And so thinking about why they do, why a person who is an observer is motivated to be the way they are can be very helpful in understanding if that is your personality or not. And the other part that I wanted to remind yourself of, not only think about what your motivation is for what you do, but secondly, to recognize that this is a spiritual formation tool. So accepting yourself does not preclude the attempts to improve.
Oh, shucks.
So as Flannery O'Connor observes, your Enneagram number is not like a note from your mother that you can hand to the universe whenever you behave badly that says, to whom it may concern, you must excuse my child, who's a number 9 or whatever number, and because they're incapable of acting any better. And I really loved to include that and understand that in our journey with Christ and who we are and how we express ourselves more freely and more deeply. I wanted to then reflect with you on our reading from our daily reader that we've been using on letting go today. So what I wanted to read to you was this piece. If we are willing to let go of the life we had planned, we will be empowered to embrace the life to which we are called, traveling distances we never dreamed of that were possible. So in other words, in our lives all the time, there's ups and downs, and there's things that go on, and we are transforming constantly. So because we're constantly transforming, we have to embrace the new and understand ourselves in order to get the most out of it. That's what we're called to. So when you imagine it this way, life is filled with hurts and disappointments, right? And frankly, when you start to attach to understanding who you are and how you express yourself, you have to look at what it was that hurt you in the purest expression of yourself when you were born. As you grew, what were the things that hurt you and disappointed you and caused you to create that shell around yourself that you have, that causes you not to be able to let yourself be free in the most beautiful expression of your being? And if we look at it, our promise of life as we look in Lent is always about death and resurrection, isn't it? And if we look at what Christ shows us, he shows us in the willingness to experience death and resurrection, that there's transformation in life after every death into a resurrection of something even more beautiful. So as you go through this time in working in the Enneagram, if you can be willing to listen with an undefended heart and hear those things that are in you, that are wounds that need to be healed, you can let some of those old stories die away. And in the pain of letting those go, you can be resurrected into a transformed and more beautiful life. And this happens. It happens all the time because we're continuously changing. Our bodies are changing, our minds are changing, our circumstances are changing. Whatever we're going through now won't be what next year will be like. And so when we take the Enneagram and we allow it to heal parts in us, it allows us to open up to each new aspect of our lives and be transformed and find the highest amount of love and give away the highest amount of love of our journey. So I'd like us to think about that this night as we look at the personality number 5, our observer. And as we before we move into that, I'd like to ask if there's anyone that wants to comment on this idea of the challenge of transformation as you learn about who you are. Have you experienced anything that's gone, I don't really like carrying that. I do think that's mine. I do think I need to let some of the walls down in that place and maybe look another way. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share about any of that part of the experience so far in the journey with studying the Enneagram as far as we are now? Is there anything anyone would like to say? All right, then we'll move on if it's from that place. And I want to start with just a few things about the number 5 that I think are important to see in their in the personality. And what I'd like to talk about is let me see if I can pop it up for us. Let me see if I can do it. Okay, let's see if I can find the one that I want to share with you. One moment, please. Let's see. Here we go. All right. I want to share this one piece like we did last time before we get started into our sharing of the Wengel piece. We're going to start here. Can you see this all right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. So when we talk about Jerome's work, Jerome Wanger, we started with last week. He calls the 5 the wise person. And he talks about the idea of, we talk about the positive core value tendencies and the distorted core. So when you think about the core, imagine the essence of the beauty of the expression of this personality type. So when we look to begin with, the first really beautiful thing about a 5 is that you value and are attracted to wisdom, knowledge, understanding. For you, the intellect is the person's highest faculty. I think, therefore I am. Do any of you sense that joy in knowing wisdom and knowledge and understanding as one of the highest motivations in your journey? Does anyone in our group see that in themselves?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So that's the highest essence of that pure joy of wanting to know that. What can happen on the distorted side of that with wounds and the shell that gets created is that you can over-identify with an idealized self-image of being wise and perceptive. You can live too much out of your head and forget you have feelings in a body. Has anybody ever noticed that you can detach so much from your own feelings in your own body because of your desire to see that wise and perceptive side that you'll deny the other side, the other parts of your body in order to work in the intellectual side of yourself? Has anyone ever experienced that?
Well, I think deny is too strong. I like the way he says it, and forget you have feelings in a body. I just sort of forget that I need to take care of exercising and things like that.
Okay. All
I
right.
know I do. I don't deny it. I just forget about it.
Well, some might argue that forgetting about it is denying the care of it.
Okay.
But I'm just saying that it can, that when I use the word deny there, I'm using it as in an extreme sense. You might go after a while, wow, I have forgotten to eat. I have forgotten to exercise. Those things haven't, I need to come back to think about that. That's, I think, what I mean more by that word. Does that fit a little
Okay.
better, Nancy, if I say it that
Yep.
way?
Yeah.
Good. But I agree with you. It is a forgetting, but it's also, it's not taking care of yourself, only working with your mind. So sometimes that can be a very important and crucial thing to recognize, that in your gift, you can, in the gift of a five can also sometimes not think taking care of their body or even their feelings is as important as it is. So your passion, did you want to say something, Margie?
I don't identify wisdom with intelligence or intellect life, actually. I think there's something about wisdom and understanding. And I would contrast that with an intellectual, because I think an intellectual is too much into information.
Well, I
Whereas
think that's what happens.
wisdom is how to care for other people, to share what you've learned. It's not intellectual, is what I'm trying to say. I disagree with that.
I think when they use the word intellect there, they're meaning thinking, the activity of thinking, not intellectual so much as the activity of thinking.
Okay.
So what they're meaning is the effort to become wise is
Yep.
the effort to use the intellect to get there.
Okay.
So I think you're right. I mean, intellectual.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
They're two different things, but I think you're right. And I think the danger can be, though, of trying to, I mean, and sometimes it can be said this way. Have you ever heard anybody say to you, you're overthinking? And
yes, I get told all the time.
Yeah, and the person who's overthinking is overthinking because their primary importance is to actually reach to wisdom.
And I think the people that say you're overthinking it are sometimes saying it defensively, like they can't follow what I'm thinking. And so they dismiss it.
Oh, sometimes it can be that. And sometimes it can just, you're right, it can be overwhelming. So that's a painful thing, right? That's a painful thing when that happens, right, Nancy?
Yes.
Yeah. So
my effort is being dismissed.
Yeah, exactly. Which is your greatest desire, to bring wisdom and to help. Like Margie's saying, wisdom is usually it. I haven't ever known anybody to want to obtain wisdom for any other reason than to try to do good.
Right.
Yeah. So the next core positive value or tendency is a passion. Your passions are of the mind. And I think what he means by that is that it's a tendency to want to use the mind. Other people may want to use the body. Other people might want to, there's different ways that we do this, but that your passion is to do the best you can with how you think and how you can know and what you can do to bring the best to the world. So I think that that's what that means by passion of the mind there, that fives want to do that. On the distorted side, you can become overly intellectual, which Margie was talking about. You may be afraid of and out of touch with your feelings. So that drive to be able to obtain knowledge, to think through, to bring wisdom, can get distorted to a point where you can rely too much on it and kind of release the experiential and feeling side that combines into wisdom. Sometimes that can happen in that tendency.
But anything that's out of balance isn't
Yeah, anything that's out
generally
of
a good
balance.
thing.
Right. That's exactly what we're talking about here. The positive essence of yourself, of the 5 on one side, and the possibility of the overboard or reducing one way or the other that's out of balance. So that when you're
Right.
listening to this, imagine it that way. The positive core side would be the balanced, beautiful expression of your essence and freedom. And the distorted side would be, for whatever reason, gets drawn away from the balanced side. So that your passion for the mind is a beautiful thing, but it can get over intellectualized, and you may feel afraid of and out of touch with your feelings, that on the out of balance side. So then the next positive core value is that the 5 is a seeker of the truth. They want to discover what really is. And sometimes if it's out of balance, the 5 can become overly analytical and skeptical. Your questioning can interfere with your acting.
I think that being a seeker of truth is overlapping some with the 1's perfectionist tendencies. I think that's why I have trouble separating myself between 1 and 5, is that I know I'm perfectionist, but it's because I want things to be right.
Well, and I think that that's a really astute observation, Nancy. And I think that that leaning on the perfectionist side to want things to be perfect really expresses itself in the 5 and wanting to have the perfect knowledge and wisdom.
Yes.
I think that's a great observation of that. So now on the beauty of the core, you are perceptive, insightful. You are a perceptive, insightful, and original thinker.
See above.
And right, and but on the other side, if it gets distorted, you may be unwilling to consider others' perceptions and ideas because you think that you've thought it out enough, so you know the best, and theirs can't possibly be as good as yours.
Right.
And then on the beautiful side, you have the ability to objectively and dispassionately observe. On the distorted side, you may stay in the observer position on the sidelines and not participate in life. You are good at abstracting, synthesizing, and integrating different points of view and disparate elements. You may not make this, or on the distorted side, you may not make a decision or act until you have certitude that you have all the facts. You want to know everything before you do anything. That can be really paralyzing when it gets like that. But the gift is that you want to bring all those different aspects together. Sometimes it can just get overwhelming. And boy, I got to think in the internet age, that's got to be even a worse struggle, because there's always another thing to know and then always another thing to check out. You are in your core a fair, non-judgmental witness. In the distorted side, you may not contribute much to conversations. You let others do all the talking.
Nobody's ever accused me of that.
Well, it probably has something to do with wingage. You are a good listener. You are gentle, patient, and non-threatening. You may not contribute too much to conversations. You let others do all the talking. Now, remember, the wings have a lot to do with this, so that if you say to yourself, oh, that I like to be a good listener, but I don't feel very gentle or patient or non-threatening, and I jump in a lot, that might be because of the four other personality types that you are connected to. They may be feeding a more unique expression of yourself. So when we read these and they're talking about the core essence, imagine that this is the core essence you're going to, but you've got at least 4 other points on the Enneagram that are influencing how you do things. So these are the core, and then there's the fuller expression. And of course, none of us are perfect, right? So you have the ability in your core to get to the essence or heart of a matter. You can peer through extraneous details to get to basic structures. On the other hand, you, in your distorted state, you can reduce life to bare, dry bones, X-ray pictures, and miss the juicy, meaty aspects of life.
Now that's interesting, the ability to get to the essence or heart of the matter. I've been accused of being too, that I can cut through to things in a way that people find disconcerting. I've had people complain about, there'll be a meeting or a conference, and I'll just get irritated and say, look, consider this, or, such and such is the point, is the real point. And so I think I fit in that.
Yeah, sometimes I can see what you're saying. Sometimes with the observer, the wise one, the 5, what can happen is they can cut through what they see as the clear point, and it feels like other people's ideas are being dismissed, and that the only one who has any wisdom is the 5. And so then that can feel very frustrating and painful for people. It's a practice of being more compassionately listening to others. Even if you may have the baseline idea, it may be really important for other people to think about it and get to it, as opposed to you just cutting in because you're tired of listening and
Exactly.
point. But at the same time, it's a challenge, because you're probably most of the time very right at what the essence of the situation is, but other people need more time and space to get to it.
It's just that what they have down as a positive core,
right,
has to be handled right.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole thing. In the essence, it's how the beauty of the essence is that's the beauty of you. The challenge is to find the way to act in love with these gifts.
Yes.
Whatever our gifts are, how do we act in love when our gifts actually are our pressure points that can cause us to act in ways that are aggressive or assertive and not compassionate and merciful and supportive to others? How do we use them so that works? So yeah, that's it. So you can conclude. So see, the next one down is exactly what you're talking about. You can communicate in clean, clear, concise statements about what the issue really is. So you can do that. The question is, how do you care for the community while you're doing it? How do you say it in such a way that supports and helps the community? Because what can happen on the other side, if you're hurt or you're frustrated with the way a group is, you can be stingy with your communication. You can speak in epigrams or one-liners and are unwilling to elaborate on what you said. That can be the wounded side of the expression. So the core of the 5 has an appreciation for solitude. On the distorted side, you might get addicted to privacy. You have an exaggerated need for space and anonymity. So for an example, I was reading a story about someone, and I actually have a friend who's I'm sure is a 5. So if my friend were to call me up and say, I want you to, can you come out with me Friday night? And say I've got another plan, I'll say to my friend, because of who I am, oh gee, I'd love to go with you, but it's Anne's birthday, so I've already promised that I'd go out with her, so we're gonna go out, we're gonna go to Ilianos, and we're gonna in Niantic, we're gonna be going to dinner, so we won't be able to go out to dinner with you. And my friend will be like, oh okay. But if I said to my friend, can you go out Friday night, my friend would just say, no, I can't. I'm oversharing even the town I'm going to dinner in. My friend is just like, no, I'm not telling you what I'm doing. I'm just, no, I keep my privacy.
Oh, why?
All right, so the next thing is you have an appreciation for solitude. You can be addicted to privacy. I already said that one. All right, so you are independent and resourceful. On the distorted side, you can be a loner who wants to do everything out of your own resources. And then you are reserved, respectful, and non-intrusive at your core. And when that gets pressed on, you have an overdeveloped, you have overdeveloped the tendency to move away from people. And it's difficult for you to move toward with either affection or assertion. I know a little boy that I think is a 5. I don't know fully yet, but this little boy is, all of these things are this little boy, and he's 9. And this idea of the tendency to move away from people, both trying to bring either affection or assertion, is very much a challenge that he has even at 9 years old already. So if we look at what it is that in terms of our spiritual journey, what our virtue and our passion is, how we're working, what we're trying to develop, and what's the reaction in the world that we have, that are our passion, or our passions are never thought of in the Christian spiritual world as a gift. Passions are thought of as the things that go out of control in you. You probably already know that, like Dante's Inferno and things like that talk about the passions, and the passions are not, they're those things that can go out of control in you that are not helpful. So at any rate, for the virtue that the 5s have is a detachment, an ability to really listen with an undefended heart, without an agenda, to have to manipulate, but to be really open with compassion, to listen to what's going on without feeling like they have to prove anything. They just listen and love, a kind of detachment that allows for that kind of generosity. So they can be non-possessive. They can possess a spirit of non-attachment, which doesn't mean you don't love and you don't care. It means that you're open to the outcome. The outcome in love is more important than you being attached to any particular outcome. That's the virtue. And you take what you need and let the rest go. So you're not, you know what I mean? You feel abundance, you feel peace, and you don't feel you have to push for something to go any particular way. On the distorted side, in avarice, you can be greedy, and to avoid an inner sense of emptiness or feeling externally dependent on others, you will fill yourself up and store up in yourself information and materials, so you don't have to feel dependent or needy. You can, on the virtuous side, you express a balanced, appropriate response to inner and outer stimuli. On the passion side, you hoard information and hold on to what you have and know. You are stingy with your time, possessions, ideas, feelings, and self. Those, now, when you think about passions, imagine, I look at it this way. I have a roommate that rides in the car with me. My roommate is an incessant chatter person who has all kinds of negative things to try to drag me into, whether it's a negative judgment or a situation. If I don't respond to the negative judgment of a situation, they'll try to tell me something to be afraid of. If I don't respond to what I should be afraid of, my roommate will begin to tell me stories from my past that I ought to think about, because they weren't things that make me happy. If my roommate was driving in a car with me, I would open the door and kick them out. We all have one. We all have one. So imagine that on the passion side, that's your roommate talking in a 5. The one that you want to kick out while the car is still moving. So that's those, I just wanted to show you those things. And if from this perspective, so that we can then, with that openness, that we could look at our simplified work that we have, that I think is really beautiful, by Elizabeth and her partner, to help us see all the different layers of detail. So is there anything anybody wants to say about what we just saw in that first representation before we move into our second piece to talk? Alrighty then. I don't want to rush you, but I figure you probably would put your hand up if you had a thought right at the moment, right? So feel free to put your hand up at different times if you have anything that you'd like to share. And if I miss something, somebody tell me, okay? All right, so here we are, my friends. The observer. Yogi Berra was considered an observer, and his quote is, "You can observe a lot just by watching." Here we go. Fives are motivated by the need to know and understand everything, to be self-sufficient, and to avoid looking foolish. Anybody feel like that?
Partly.
Partly.
I guess I don't mind looking foolish as much as this seems to suggest, because there are a lot of things I don't know, and I'd rather find them out and look foolish than not learn them, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. The only thing that I would suggest to you is that that might be a cloaked understanding, because to actually have the attitude, well, I don't know everything, but I want to learn. So I don't mind looking foolish so I can learn so I won't look foolish, if you see what I mean.
No.
In other words,
That
the
came out,
motivation-
I mean, that said what I said, and it sounded really awful.
I don't mean for it to sound awful. The Enneagram
Well,
can sound like that sometimes. But what it means is that, what's the motivation? So if I say I don't know everything and I'm willing to look foolish so I can learn it, if you think underneath that, there's still a sense that I want to learn, so then I
sure.
won't look foolish.
Oh, no, the motivation isn't that. I'm just curious.
Okay. Well, you're just curious.
I just feel more curious than anything else, because I
Well,
learned things that I never tell anybody else about because it never comes up.
yeah.
And I'm just intrigued by things.
Mhm. Well, again, we need to be careful how we see any of these words, but the question would be like, a five, because their pursuit is with the intellect, and their desire is to develop wisdom and to be self-sufficient. Imagine, have you ever felt, when you meet people that you're working with that are say, that have the same kind of pursuits, do you ever feel anxious about saying anything because you're afraid that you might appear less knowledgeable than them or less wise than them in what you say? Do you ever feel uncomfortable like that?
Sure.
And that would probably be a better way to put that than looking foolish. The paper that we're looking at is kind of whimsical. So
Yeah,
they
nobody wants to
sometimes
look like an idiot,
right. And so,
but you can look ignorant, and that's all right.
yeah. So, I mean, everybody kind of feels like that, I'm sure, but I'm just saying, I think they're using a whimsical phrase here
Oh, okay.
that probably could have been better phrased than the way they used it. But they're talking about that anxiety of wanting to, express yourself wisely and being uncomfortable with feeling like you might not.
Okay.
So that you got to remember this. And I really love this little book because it really kind of cuts to the chase on everything. We can have good conversations, but if there's a word that you don't like, let's pick the words apart. Every single one. I want to remind everybody, whenever we're listening, if you find a word that you don't feel like is the right word that feels good, we should pick the word apart to make sure, because they're just presenting it in a fairly whimsical way. And we want to make sure the understanding is done well. Okay. So fives at their best are analytical, persevering, sensitive, wise, objective, perceptive, and self-contained. Fives, and again, I hate that word worse. I'm going to say fives at their stress
Yeah.
stress side or stretch side can be intellectually arrogant, stingy, stubborn, distant, critical of others, unassertive, and negative.
And all I can say is the difference between persevering and stubborn is a fine one.
That's a fine line. Yes, it is. It's a razor's edge.
It's in the eye of the perceiver. of the beholder.
Exactly. And the problem is for most of us that we perceive ourselves one way when the entire crowd perceives us another.
Exactly.
So how to get along with me? Be independent, not clingy. Speak in straightforward and brief manner. I need time alone to process my feelings and thoughts. Remember that if I seem aloof, distant, or arrogant, it may be that I am feeling uncomfortable. Make me feel welcome, but not too intensely, or I might doubt your sincerity. If I become irritated when I have to repeat things, it may be because it was such an effort to get my thoughts out in the first place. Don't become like a bulldozer. Help me to avoid my pet peeves, big parties, other people's loud music, overdone emotions, and intrusions on my privacy. How do any of those sound to you, Nancy?
Yeah. Pretty good.
I find that, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, it's just the big parties, other people's loud music, that can all be being introverted too. And I think that there needs to be a realization that somebody could be, I think a 1 is a more extroverted version and a 5 is a more introverted version. And I don't know if it's possible to be an extroverted 5 or not, because an extrovert would get energy from big parties and other people's loud music, and I get drained by them. So that's really introversion, extroversion, not intellectualization.
And again, we need to remember that when we're talking about a personality type, there are broad sweeps of expression of that type.
Mm-hmm.
So that it with the four other personality types that come into play on any one type, there can be variations within the expression. So it may very well be that there could be, although it would be, I think, on the rarer side, there could be a more extroverted 5, but they would still be a 5. They just would have a different interplay of wings and a different interplay with the way they react when they're stressed and the way they react when they're in peace. So I think that it would make sense, though, that for the most part, I think you're right. And there is this meshes very well with Myers-Briggs typing, and I would say for sure that the observer, the name, the most common name for a 5, the observer, would pretty much indicate someone who was more introverted than extroverted.
Mm-hmm. And maybe the INTJ, not necessarily J and P could be balanced. T is more typical. N or S could be either. It could be IS, IN, T or F, and P or J.
So that just even in your expression of that, we can see how different the different expressions of that personality can be.
Yeah, a little analytical, aren't I? God,
Yeah,
sorry.
Don't want to say anything, but yeah, I think we got a ringer here, people. Ringer, 5.
Oh, okay, I guess I don't have any data anymore.
I love that. Nancy, I love it. It was perfect. What a nice way to reveal it.
The big reveal.
The big reveal. All right, here we go. Relationships. 5s at their best in a relationship are kind, perceptive, open-minded, self-sufficient, and trustworthy. 5s, when they're stressed or struggling in their relationship, can be contentious, suspicious, withdrawn, and negative. They are on their guard against being engulfed. And that's one thing I want to talk about with children with 5s. I just want to pause here for a minute and say that I want to just read you this little part from our other person, our Ian Morgan and Susan Stabile. He writes this about 5s as children. He says, Many fives I know say they grew up with a parent who was intrusive or engulfing, while others describe childhoods that lacked affection or deep, meaningful interactions with their caretakers. Sensitive and quiet, these five kids took refuge in the realm of their minds where they could fend off or hide from overbearing parents, as well as work through their feelings out of sight. As kids, fives are curious, imaginative, and comfortable with being alone. Many are computer whizzes and voracious readers who enjoy collecting things. My five friend Dan grew up with 6 rowdy siblings in a tiny house in rural Texas. To escape the mayhem, he turned one half of his father's tool shed into a haven. I spent a million hours in that shed reading The Lord of the Rings and taking things apart to figure out how they worked. It was where my friends and I made our first foray into the world of computer coding. My brothers and sisters were loud, outgoing attention seekers, while I didn't ask for much, really. I couldn't have faulted my mother if one night over dinner, she had looked up from her plate at me and said, "Wait, who are you?" Kids who are fives are usually quiet and self-contained. They are uncomfortable when they can't take care of themselves, so they have learned to hold onto themselves instead of others. They find answers to most of their questions within themselves, and they have far more information about things than they share. These kids have mixed feelings about school. They are smart and enjoy learning, and they usually make good grades. However, the social demands of the school are hard to read and a challenge to accommodate. It feels to them like people either want too much time with them or not enough. They are uncomfortable spending time alone, so they would be content with just 1 or 2 friends, but they aren't adept at sharing feelings, and their need for personal space is difficult for other kids to understand. These thoughtful kids have significant fears, so they often appear to be more serious than they are. They have to be invited to be playful, and even then it feels a bit frivolous and awkward. Deep down, they are tender and compassionate and would like to be more open with their love and affection, but the vulnerability they feel is too much to navigate. We all pick up wounding messages as kids. If you're a 5, come up with words to articulate the wounding message you have picked up. It will probably be some variation on the broad theme of competency and connection, like you're not capable of handling the demands of life and relationship. To survive, you'll need to be more emotionally detached and hide. Anybody know any little 5s?
Well, I was certainly a little 5.
It was
Because
hard, it was hard, wasn't it?
Well, the being by myself and spending long time working on things and collections and reading, that's describes me to a T, because I used to disappear down into the basement and work with my microscope and work on my shell collection and just spend hours down there, and it was lovely.
Yeah.
But the message I got, if there's a single message I got, it was either that I had done something wrong or I was about to do something wrong, but nobody would tell me what it was.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really hard. Sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah.
That's hard. All of us, you'll find that each of us, as we discover the beauty and the gifts of when we were little and we were trying to navigate the world in our essence, that each one of us in our own way will be wounded. And that's where we start to build up our walls and our anxieties and our suspicions. Beauty is now, while we share all of this, we can find a way to let some of these stories go. And that's the good thing. God, Christ wants us to be healed, not to stay where we are in our wounds. So what I like about being 5, standing back and viewing life objectively, coming to a thorough understanding, perceiving causes and effects, my sense of integrity, doing what I think is right and not being influenced by social pressure, not being caught up in material possessions and status, being calm in a crisis.
Doing what is right is also very much a 1 trait.
Yeah.
Again, there's that synchrony between 5s and 1s.
And I would say if I think that's probably a pretty, those are leaned on in those two, but obviously it's a pretty basic nature for all of us to want to do what's right.
Right.
So what's hard about being a 5? Being slow to put my knowledge and insights out into the world, feeling bad when I act defensive or like a know-it-all, being pressured to be with people when I don't want to be, watching others with better social skills but less intelligence or technical skill do better professionally, having trouble expressing some of my thoughts succinctly. Typical thoughts of a 5. How can I get out of this meeting? How can I get out of my birthday party? How can I get out of the family reunion? I'm going to give him a piece of my mind as soon as I can figure out the perfect way to say it. Fives as children often spend a lot of time alone reading and making collections and so on. Have a few special friends rather than many, are very bright and curious and do well in school, have independent minds and often question their parents and teachers, watch events from a detached point of view, gathering information, assume a poker face in order not to have to look afraid, are sensitive, avoid interpersonal conflict, and feel intruded upon and controlled and or ignored and neglected. Five as parents are often kind, perceptive, and devoted, are sometimes authoritarian and demanding, may expect more intellectual achievement than is developmentally appropriate, may be intolerant of their children's expression of strong emotions. Anybody here have a 5 parent? Not really, huh? Okay. Careers, 5 are often in scientific, technical, or other intellectually demanding fields. They have strong analytical skills and are good at problem solving. Those with well-developed forewing are more likely to be counselors, musicians, artists, or writers. 5s usually like to work alone and are independent thinkers. The worst job for 5. Free
my
I thought
first-
that one about the best first date was right on.
Yep.
When I first read that, I thought it said if you could scroll down, up, I thought it said my job is to uninspire.
Oh,
Oh, my job is to uninspire. Yes.
oh.
Free time. 5s enjoy reading books, learning about subjects in depth, having stimulating discussion with friends, going to concerts, museums, and lectures, playing intellectually challenging games, working on their collections or projects, and traveling to study foreign cultures and customs. Comments about 5s. She enjoys her own company. I marvel at the hours she spends by herself reading, gardening, playing music, and analyzing the universe. His voice is soft, calm, and soothing. He has a different perspective on things. For example, regarding an insult from someone as an interesting event. She is full of information and innovative ideas. I also like her dry and whimsical sense of humor. I was always impressed at how much my 5 friend would contribute to any conversation on any subject. I think I figured out why people call me an arrogant know-it-all. It's because they're stupid.
Yeah, but what can you do? You know?
so let's look at wings and see if we can see some of the different aspects and expressions of a 5. Your personality may blend into or be influenced by the types on either side of yours. A strong wing can make a big difference in your personality. 5s with a more developed forewing tend to be more creative, humanistic, sensitive, empathic, and self-absorbed. 5s with a more developed 6 wing tend to be more loyal, anxious, skeptical, and cautious. They're more likely to be interested in the sciences.
I have a 6 wing.
Mhm. Moving around within the Enneagram, following the lines in the diagram, the 5 moves towards the 8 in one direction and towards the 7 in the other. 5s move toward the positive side of 8 when they feel secure. They can also consciously cultivate these positive qualities. 5s move toward the negative side of 7 when in stress. They can consciously try to avoid those negative traits. So you should read and know and learn about the 8 and the 7 to help you understand more of the fullness of your expression. When 5s move towards the positive side of 8, they get in touch with their body, its power, its energy by moving away from pure thought and toward action. Trust their instincts more, become more outspoken and spontaneous, become more assertive, doing whatever it takes to win when they have a justifiable cause to uphold, become energized and motivated by their anger instead of withdrawing, and defend themselves more effectively and set clear limits. When 5s move towards the negative side of 8, they become punitive, act unreasonably, and ignore other people's feelings and desires blatantly instead of secretly. That would be us 8s. I would tell you that I can be very much that as an 8.
It's sort of like blatantly instead of secretly implies that you're doing it all the time. It's just whether it's in or out.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm going to say, like, in certain moments, probably you may want to ignore other people's feelings for what you know. It may not be all the time, but you may find that there are times when you're trying to be kind, so you secretly hold back your desire to just ignore what the other person's thinking. So I wouldn't say it's all the time, but I would say that that on the negative side, when it gets to be too much, you just get blatant. I don't care what you think. Shut up! I told you what the answer is.
Yes.
It's enough. It's enough. So when 5s move toward the negative side of 7, they take on new projects impulsively and become scattered and distracted. And when 5s move toward the positive side of 7, they experience life more broadly, become less self-conscious, and become more fun-loving and uninhibited.
Now that's taking on new projects is a real problem.
Yeah.
That's something I'm noticing I'm doing lately, and I have to stop.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's a challenge that
I like
can
the
happen.
potential of them all.
Yeah,
I like
exactly.
the potential of the doing and the
Yeah. It's shiny objects. In my neck of the woods, we call them magpie shiny objects. Oh, that one's shiny. Wait a minute, this one's shiny. Oh, that one's shiny. So, practical suggestions and exercises for the 5. Get out of your head and into doing. Take risks and speak up, even if you fear appearing foolish. Emulate some others you know who are not afraid to put their foot in their mouth. Become more active by taking up creative sports activities. Value being in the present. Go for psychotherapy or body work to learn to express your feelings. Sometimes that can be important. I mean, I think that I like the recommendation of doing something like getting a massage or like doing yoga, things like that, where you're doing something to get more into that feeling side of your being.
Oh, okay. I'm taking off now.
All right. Love you, Paul. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Relationships. If you have a tendency to deliver long treatises Limit yourself to 2 or 3 sentences and then determine if people are interested before continuing. Make it a conversation. When you're in a group, be aware of any desperate urge to prove you know something. Let others know it when they're important to you. When you feel the tendency to give to others, go ahead and do it. Ask for what you want, including setting of limits. If you desire more experience in interacting with people, become a member of an ongoing therapy group where it's acceptable to speak or not speak. Things fives would never dream of doing. Missing an opportunity to exhibit their extensive knowledge of an obscure area of their field to their colleagues. Throwing a big party. Volunteering to be the master of ceremonies at their next high school reunion. Subscribing to the newspaper only for the society page. Becoming a used car salesman or selling vacuums door to door. Referring to the plants in their gardens by their everyday name instead of their Latin name. Going away with a group where they didn't get a minute by themselves for 2 weeks. Positive things to say to yourself. Interaction and experience are necessary for real understanding. I will experience being an individual fully when I empty myself of my preconceived ideas and categories. I don't have to be the smartest person. I wanted to just give you 10 paths for transformation for a 5. So, number 1, allow your feelings to arise naturally and experience them in the present moment, and then you can let them go. Number 2, recognize when you are succumbing to a scarcity mentality by hoarding affection, privacy, knowledge, time, love, money, material possessions, or thoughts. 3, when something occurs that seems to elicit emotions in other people, try to feel with them in the moment rather than saving those feelings to process later. Number 4, try sharing more of your life with others, trusting they won't misuse the information. 5, venture out of your comfort zone and share more of who you are and what you have with others. 6, try to remember that you don't have to answer for everything. You don't have an answer for everything. If you don't have an answer for everything, you won't look foolish, just human. 7, call a friend and offer to hang out for no reason other than it would be that you would enjoy their company. 8, allow yourself some material and experiential luxuries. I think you do well at that because it says buy a new mattress or travel.
Well, I do need a new mattress.
And then 9, take up yoga or another activity that will connect you with your body. Overcoming the disconnect between your body and head will be life-changing. And 10, when you are unsure of yourself, jump into a conversation rather than withdrawing from it. That's the 5, my friends. Anything anybody want to say about 5?
Where were those suggestions from?
They're from a book it's from the book by Morgan Ian Crone and Suzanne Strabel called The Road Back to You, an Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything
My
else somebody wants to
ex-wife
say?
was a 5.
What's that? What's that?
I think my ex-wife was a 5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when we read the parenting part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how you can start to see things, right? I love that you could observe that, Roger. I think that if we we don't necessarily have to label someone, but we can see the expressions in them. The one thing I find that I know with my friends who have a lot of 5 in them is that it's really important to respect their space and their privacy and their need to come to you, not you come to them. My little boy who's 9 years old, that's my friend, I have to be very careful to not be too affectionate with him. I mean, physically affectionate, because that feels intrusive for him. So when we can know that about people we love, we can start compassionately to respond to them, because we can see what they're grappling with. So one of the things that's our gift as people who are seeking to know love and bring more love is not just identifying ourselves, but being able to see compassionately some of the needs in other people's personalities, so we can help them feel safe and be able to express themselves more fully. So I think that's a good thing, don't you? It's not about people changing. It's about loving people where they are. We're all going to change eventually, somehow, some way. But if we can mercifully love each other, that'll make strides for each other. So with that all being said, that's where we are for tonight on the Personality 5. And next week is 6. I'm surprised Andy isn't here. Andy's got a high combo. He thinks he's a pure 6, but I think he's maybe a 5 and a 6 together. Since I hang around with him a lot, it'd be interesting to see what he thinks. All right, my dears, that is the end of our class for tonight. Mwah. I will see you soon. Be well.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.